New year, new camera. It never ends. Welcome back, folks. My name's Shane. I'm coming to you from the stinking hot shores of Perth in Western Australia. Look how beautiful this place is, man. It's absolutely insane. And I'm here to talk about why I purchased a Panasonic G9 Mark II at the start of 2024. That's right, a micro 4/3 camera, not a full frame camera, not a Sony camera, but a micro 4/3 camera from Panasonic. I ended up trading in two of my existing cameras for this one I just purchased recently, which was the GH5 Mark II. And I also traded in my full frame original Panasonic S5. I think this camera is fantastic, and I'll talk you through all the reasoning why I ended up with this little guy right here. Let's get into it. The first reason I went for the G9 Mark II is its phase detection autofocus. It just simply works. I'm using human tracking and face detection right now, and I know it's going to work, and I can stand in the frame and I don't have to stress about looking at the selfie screen, wondering if my shot's actually going to be in focus or whether or not it's going to drift to the background. So without question, the first reason is its really powerful autofocus features. Now, this extends just past human tracking. You can also track automobiles like cars and motorcycles and even animals, and it has animal eye AF. So basically you can point this at anything and it's going to be in focus. Owning a Panasonic S5 Mark II and X has really spoiled me when it came to its autofocus performance, so much so that I thought going back to DFD wouldn't be that big of a deal. But if you're so used to using phase detection and then you go back to contrast DFD, it's pretty tough to get the same sort of results. Now, it can be done, but it's very limiting and it takes a whole lot more finessing. So I just wanted this camera to simplify my overall shooting experience. The next reason I went for the G9 Mark II is its great IBIS or in-body image stabilization system. Now, not only will it give you great results just with all the stock settings, but we get two separate e-stabilization or electronic stabilization modes that work a treat, giving you this kind of quality. Now, if you've ever tried to shoot with a wide angle lens on most camera systems, you get a little bit of flappy and warpy stuff in the corners. With this camera, it just works, which is awesome. The biggest advantage of the G9 Mark II over prior generation micro 4/3 cameras is I don't have to rely on getting the best stabilization with an optically stabilized lens. This will give you excellent results irrespective of the type of lens you're using. Whether you're shooting with cine lenses, a super wide angle prime like this, or even a zoom, you're going to get excellent results. All right, let's talk about frame rates, resolutions, and codecs. So one of the big reasons why I wanted the G9 Mark II is for the great 4K at 120 frames per second. It looks absolutely beautiful coming out of this camera. I also love the fact that G9 Mark II allows us to record in the open gate aspect ratio all the way up to 5.8K. This allows me to crop out a vertical video from the same frame. I could then crop in a 16:9 aspect ratio, giving me a lot of flexibility to reuse my content and repurpose it for Instagram Reels, Shorts, or anything I like. This is a really cool feature. It saves me having to flip the camera sideways and re-record it for a vertical video aspect ratio. It also gives me far more information than just recording in your standard 16:9 and then cropping that vertically. So it's a really great mode, and I'm using it right now. It's definitely one of my favorite features on this camera. Unlike the GH6, I love that the G9 Mark II has an S&Q option on the front, so I can store my favorite slow motion setting and cycle between my regular frame rate, say open gate 5.8K, shooting vlog, and then I can set up an S&Q option shooting up to 4K at 120 frames per second or above in HD. So it gives me lots of different resolutions, codecs, and frame rates to choose from. It's an absolute powerhouse of a hybrid camera. Now we're over to the 25mm f1.7 prime lens to talk about the real-time LUT loader, which is a feature that I've been using far more than I first thought I would on the Panasonic S5 Mark II and X. This feature allows you to burn in your favorite LUT at the time of filming, so you don't have to add it in post-production, just saving you a whole bunch of time. The benefit of the real-time LUT loader is you're still able to capture the full 13 plus stops of dynamic range, so there's no trade-off except for the fact that you don't need to spend as much time in editing, adding a LUT after the fact. The G9 Mark II allows you to store up to 10 LUTs in camera, which is fantastic, and then you can preview which one you want to shoot with at the time of recording, which makes the whole process a whole lot easier than just seeing that desaturated look, especially if you're a solo content creator. So the real-time LUT loader is something I've been using far more than I ever anticipated. Another well-known benefit to micro 4/3 is the size of their lenses. This is a 25mm f1.7 prime for micro 4/3 versus the 24mm f1.8 prime for the Panasonic L mount. So as you can see, there's a huge difference in terms of their size, essentially allowing me to bring 2 or 3 micro four thirds lenses to every one full frame lens, which makes it perfect for travel. It also keeps the size and weight down. 2 or 3 of these lenses weigh about the same as one of these. Now let's talk about dynamic range. So one of the biggest reasons I moved the GH5 Mark II on was it was noticeably worse when it came to dynamic range. I also have a GH6 and there was a big difference between the two, especially when shooting in Vlog versus Vlog-L, and the new sensor technology on the GH6 has that dynamic range boost feature. Now speaking of which, the GH6 has that DR or dynamic range boost feature, but you're limited to 2000 ISO when shooting Vlog or 800 in the standard picture profiles. On the G9 Mark II, you don't have to enable anything. It just gives you the maximum amount of dynamic range at any ISO setting, starting from the base at 500 when shooting Vlog. So I can get awesome dynamic range in any shot just by turning the camera on and hitting record. I much prefer this. It just keeps everything a whole lot easier. I'm glad Panasonic listened to the feedback on the GH6, because while that was a great feature, I would always need to carry around a lot of ND filters. I'm not using anything. I'm just shooting in aperture priority mode, and it's working, or fingers crossed anyway. But yeah, it looks great in my tests, and it's just a really simplified way of getting more dynamic range. Now let's talk about overheating and my experience with it. So another reason why I went for the G9 Mark II is that it's pretty hard to overheat this camera. So if you have it set to the low temperature setting in the thermal management option, you can get it to overheat, especially when shooting 5.8K when it's 36 degrees Celsius out here. I switched it to high and I haven't even seen that warning message. The only time I got this camera to overheat was when I was shooting 4K at 120 frames per second indefinitely. For the best results with this camera, just set the thermal management to high and you can pretty much forget about it. And again, I'm using it outside here on a day like today without any problems. I think it's probably dropped a couple of degrees since I first started, but it's still working great. The G9 Mark II doesn't actually have any active cooling, so it's all passive, much like the original GH5 or GH5 Mark II. So it does a great job at dissipating heat, but it's not as good as the GH6 or the S5 Mark II or X. So just keep that in mind. If you're going to be running a camera in direct sunlight all day, the GH6 would be the better choice. But still, I'm able to get this to work without any problems. And the last reason I traded up my GH5 Mark II back in for the G9 Mark II is the handheld high resolution mode. Now for micro four thirds, we get a 25 megapixel sensor, which is more than enough, but if we need to get a high resolution 100 megapixel image, we can, and it's all done in camera. Gone are the days of having to transfer all those files to your computer and then compiling them in some sort of software. It's all done in camera, so you can simply get a really high resolution photo with very minimal effort. And this is one feature that I can appreciate, especially if you're going somewhere for the first time and you want to capture the most amount of information you can in an image. This is a really great feature, and if you're a full-time photographer, give it a look. It's the handheld high resolution mode. While I'm in Perth, I'm actually shooting 2 episodes of my guitar shop walkthrough series for my other channel. So I'm going to be using the S5 Mark II X as my primary camera, and the G9 Mark II will be my B camera. But we're shooting 2 episodes, so if the performance of the G9 Mark II works as well as what I hope, given it's got the excellent IBIS, I've got a super wide angle lens on it right now, this 9mm is awesome, I might use it as the A camera for the second shoot, or just the only camera. Because we get that S&Q mode, I can switch modes nice and easily without any crops and make it work. So it's a really great camera, and I'll let you know how we go with that. When I did buy the GH5 Mark II recently, I thought it would be the camera that I take for trips like this, but yeah, the S5 Mark II and X have spoiled me silly when it comes to their performance and image quality, that I noticed an immediate difference going back to the GH5 Mark II, which is why I thought long term, I'm better off with the G9 Mark II. The biggest lesson I've learned over the last month or so is that going backwards is tough, especially once you've gone forward. So if you own a Panasonic S5 Mark II or X, and then you try using the original S5, there's a lot of compromises there. Same can be said if you've got a GH6 and you go back to a GH4. It's not even close, and I'm sure a lot of people can still get great results out of those cameras, but there's a lot of compromises, and I felt exactly the same way rebuying my Panasonic GH5 Mark II instead of the G9 Mark II. I don't know what I was thinking, but in the end, it all worked out. I was able to trade this back in to get the G9 Mark II, and I couldn't be happier. This will make my life and shooting a whole lot easier, which is what it's all about. So thanks for watching. I will catch you soon. See ya.